Billy Miller is worried.
Well, I'm a worrier, so we can start with that.
In Kevin Henkes' Newbery Honor Book, The Year of Billy Miller, Billy worries he won't be smart enough for the second grade. Kevin is also the author and illustrator behind Caldecott Medal winner Kitten's First Full Moon, Lily's Purple Plastic Purse, Chrysanthemum, Wemberly Worried, and more. This is Kevin.
Can I read a quote that I really love? This is from the sociologist Irving Goffman. He made the following observation: to walk, to cross a road, to utter a complete sentence, to wear long pants, to tie one's shoes, to add a column of figures. All these routines that allow the individual unthinking, competent performances were attained through an acquisition process whose early stages were negotiated in a cold sweat. And I think that's who I write for, and that's who I try to channel when I'm doing that.
Maybe the easy things didn't always come so easily. And maybe if you think back, you'll remember all those cold sweats, all those worries. Maybe you don't have to try so hard at all. Maybe you're a worrier too, not Lynne Rae Perkins.
I don't think I was a worrier until about maybe in junior high I started worrying because I was a kind of a late bloomer and I couldn't understand what was going on. So I worried then, but I think up until that point I was a fairly confident kid.
Lynne Rae is the author and illustrator of Newbery Medal winner Criss Cross, At Home in a Faraway Place, Pictures from Our Vacation, The Museum of Everything, and more. I asked her what she loves most about Kevin's books.
Aside from wondering, what am I even doing in this business when Kevin is making such gorgeous and perfect and fresh in every way books? What I mostly enjoy about his books are how funny they are in really subtle ways and in loving and respectful ways.
Those are the qualities that resonate most with readers. The characters are real and tender, and as Kevin learned with The Year of Billy Miller, they become whoever and whatever we need them to be.
In terms of Billy Miller worrying, I think it's really interesting because when that book came out, I went on a fairly biggish book tour. And it was absolutely fascinating to me because I had people come up to me and say, "Oh, thank goodness, finally a book about just a normal, ordinary kid." But then someone would say, "Oh, it's so wonderful to have a book about a gifted child." And, "Oh, it's great to have a book about someone with anxiety disorder."
Whatever you need Billy Miller to be, he is a sweet kid raised in Constant, Wisconsin, who falls and bumps his head during a family vacation to visit the Jolly Green Giant.
Everything seemed all right until a few nights later when Billy overheard his parents talking in the kitchen. "I'm worried about him," said Mama. "He's fine," said Papa. "Everyone said he's fine, and he seems fine. He is fine." "You're probably right," said Mama. "But I worry that down the line something will show up. He'll start forgetting things." "He already forgets things," said Papa. "He's a 7-year-old boy." "You know what I mean," said Mama. She paused. "Or he'll be confused at school, or..." That's all Billy heard. He snuck up to his room and closed the door. And that's when he started to worry. Billy didn't tell anyone that he was worried. Sometimes he didn't know how to say what he was thinking. He had words in his head, but they didn't always make it to his mouth. This happened often, even before the fall.
At its heart, the book pulls back the curtain on one family, in whose small slices of everyday life we find the most delicate moments. I'm Lisa DeSaro. This is Remember Reading.
I am interested in the ripple and not the wave. I'm interested in small domestic stories. And I think that if you look at those small domestic details and shed light on them in a particular way and look at them maybe from a different angle. I mean, I would think it really is illuminating, and it can tell you a lot about life.
But there are those who, in spite of enjoying the book, might tell you that not all that much happens in the year of Billy Miller, like one notable reviewer on Goodreads. Kevin asked me if he could read the review.
This made me laugh, and I had to print it out when I first saw it. This was years ago. But the reviewer says, "As I read The Year of Billy Miller, I kept waiting for the big bad thing to happen. The book is divided into sections called Teacher, Father, Sister, and Mother. As I finished one, I would think, oh, wow, nothing bad happened in that section. Does the next character have something terrible happen? When nothing happens to the sister, I was going crazy, thinking the author was going to kill off the mother, but there were not that many pages left. Then I thought, oh no, Billy is going to be diagnosed with a brain tumor. The thoughts running in my head were really awful. I know this book made it on many of the year's best book lists and even a few mock Newbery lists. So I thought something really crazy had to happen. I guess I was expecting something else. Of course, the writing is brilliant and the story is good too. It's just not a tragic plot twister." And I thought that was so funny because to me, the book was loaded with things that were emotional and big and meaningful and dramatic. But I guess my world is maybe a little bit protected or something.
But the drama of most of Kevin's work is meaningful and emotional. We just might have to remember what it was like to be in those moments of childhood where everything is big, from school plays to first crushes to bullies.
I think that Kevin, he writes about feelings and experiences that we all share in one way or another, including hard feelings and experiences, which he doesn't downplay or soft pedal. Kevin and I had a conversation one time. We were talking about how people sometimes describe our books as quiet books, but to us, they seem like so jam-packed full of really big things. They don't seem quiet to us at all. But so he has these hard feelings and experiences, but his characters find their way through. And I think this gives us the sense that we can find our way through too.
For Lynne Rae, it's the way that Kevin lets his characters show emotion that shows how much he respects the intelligence of his readers.
Billy's worries are very real worries for a 7-year-old, as are his feelings. And he's allowed by Kevin to have strong feelings. He's allowed to say he hates something, and he's allowed to be angry. And his parents are allowed to be real people too. His dad is working through his artist's block, and he's not always cheery, but he's always loving. And another thing I love about this book is how visual it is. It starts right at the beginning. He says something like, they traveled from the Black Hills to Blue Earth, Minnesota, to see the Jolly Green Giant, and his teacher has red chopsticks in her hair. And they're these really like simple things and simply, clearly stated, but really poetic in their way.
Of course, Kevin makes his appeals to adults too. Among Kevin's many mouse characters, we meet Chester in Chester's Way. Chester might be described by adults as tightly wound, and when Chester gets bullied, it's the language Kevin uses to describe it that might give you a laugh, like it did for Lynne Rae.
I was rereading Chester's Way also, and the bullies don't just call Chester and William names. They could have done that, but he says, they circled Chester and Wilson and yelled personal remarks, which just makes me laugh.
Personal remarks registers to the adult ear as humorous and original. We see similarly delightful language in all of Kevin's work. We see it in the book Chrysanthemum, a story about a young mouse who loves her long and unusual name until she's bullied by some girls at school.
Chrysanthemum's mother says they're just jealous, which people used to say to me when I was little, and I never really believed it, but her dad says, and envious and begrudging and discontented and jaundiced, which I just think is hilarious. Part of being a writer of picture books is that you're writing for two audiences, of course. You're writing for the children and you're writing for the parents, and those are the kind of things that make the parents happy to read a book over and over again.
Those are the sorts of books where Kevin found that same kind of joy, the joy of language. He would read with his kids before school or after dinner, things like Beverly Cleary's Ramona books or E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. They created an opening for connection.
Often, we had this shared thing in our family that we would discuss at dinner. I mean, it brought up things that were happening in our real lives would sometimes be mirrored in the books, and that was interesting. So that was important too. Another thing that became very clear was which books were such a joy to read aloud. Charlotte's Web, Stuart Little, they were just delightful to read and wonderful to read. The rhythm of the words was extraordinary.
It turned out the way the language sounded was just as important to Kevin as the meanings of the words. Of course, Kevin says he wants his work to be entertaining and emotionally true, but that's not all.
I want to write good sentences. Sometimes that's hard. When I write a picture book, but also a novel, I always read it aloud to myself. And when I read it, you can hear it. And it's about rhythm. It's about saying enough, but not too much. It's about making sure that there is space between the lines. Sometimes I will spend hours, longer, days, whatever, just searching for the right word. And sometimes it's number of syllables. I mean, do you want a little bit of alliteration in a sentence? Do you not? All those things really matter. And I think when you read it aloud, you hear it, you know it. And I write very slowly. I write sentence by sentence and word by word without an outline. So I'm really living it. And I write really slowly. So I'll go over a paragraph, sometimes for days, just trying to get it to be what I think is exactly right.
Lynne Rae's work has a poetry of its own, too. Like Kevin's, it comes from her lived experience. At Home in a Faraway Place was inspired by a real trip Lynne Rae took to Antigua. The book follows the young Lissy, who goes with her father and grandmother to visit her father's old friend in an unnamed faraway place where everyone speaks Spanish.
Everything that happened to me is in this book. So we got picked up at the airport and drove through this like velvety dark blackness over these winding hills and up and down.
The language is invariably alive. Part of that might be owed to her love of learning languages.
I love things about how languages work. And for example, this is an example from the book, but the Spanish word for fish is pez. And the Spanish word, but that's a fish that's in the water, a fish that's, as soon as it's out of the water, it's called pescado. And I thought, oh, that sounds like pez, caught. Oh. And I just love little things like that. Oh, and then another one that I really love is the Spanish word for turkey is pavo. And the Spanish word for peacock is pavo real, which means royal turkey, which is so perfect.
Lynne Rae loves how language can surprise us. And there's a kind of playfulness, not just in the words, but in the way they look and feel. The book, like The Year of Billy Miller, has black and white illustrations throughout every chapter. They show us some of Lissy's new Spanish vocabulary and allow readers to connect the words with the images in a way that extends beyond storytelling into learning. Lynne Rae's always been drawn to words and images, but the path to illustration didn't come quickly.
I was a very late bloomer. I've always been a reader, and in college I studied art. I studied printmaking in undergrad and in grad school. When people would ask me what I wanted to do, I would always say, well, I might be an illustrator. But mostly I said that because it was a socially acceptable thing to say if you were an artist. And it sounded like practical, although I had really no idea how I would go about it.
But in her early 30s, Lynne Rae came in contact with a childhood friend who would open up the art world to her.
She was a designer of software, and she was working on this program called, what was it called? Color and Read in English and Spanish. And it was a bilingual coloring book for the computer. And she hired me to do some drawings of different sentences. And the main requirement of these drawings was that, for example, there would be a complete circle so that if you clicked on it, the color wouldn't bleed into the next shape. I mean, artistically, they were not fabulous things, but I really enjoyed communicating with her. We were doing it by mail. This was a long time ago. And I wanted to know her better.
Lynne Rae sent her some drawings she'd made about being a young mother, and in response, her friend signed her up for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Conference.
And it included a portfolio review with Ava Weiss. And I had about 4 months to prepare for it.
So Lynne Rae prepared her portfolio, and at the conference, Green Willow art director Ava Weiss asked her if she wrote too.
And I said, well, I have some ideas. And she gave me her card and said, send us your ideas. And so I had been thinking about this story for about 6 months. So I went home and I typed it up. And it only took me like 3 days to type up because I'd been thinking about it for so long. And I sent it to them and they bought it and wanted me to illustrate it. And so I thought, oh, maybe this is something I could do.
While Lynne Rae had a bit more skepticism at the possibility of becoming a career artist, Kevin knew no other option. When he does school visits, kids often ask him when he decided on a career as an illustrator and author. He tells them this.
I cannot remember a time when I did not want to draw. And so I don't think I chose it. I think it chose me. And I was one of those kids who loved books. I loved to draw.
Drawing and books have always been inseparable parts of his life, and that was nurtured at home.
My mother made it really part of our lives to go to the library. So going to the library was like going to the grocery store, going to school. It's just what you did.
As a worrier, going to school was just a tiny bit harder, though Kevin loved it.
I was a kid who loved school, but I also was pretty shy, and I loved being home. And I do remember that feeling when a new school year would start that, I'd feel excited, but also I would be filled with trepidation too. And I loved being home. And I can remember that feeling of opening the door at the end of the day, when you come home and you just feel like everything is okay and you're back home.
Kevin was a lot like Billy Miller, actually. At one point in the book, Billy has to make a diorama of a habitat. He chooses a bat cave as his subject.
To complete his cave, Billy chose some pebbles from Papa's assortment of things from the garage and glued them to the bottom of the box. He was proud of what he'd done. Billy had been so focused on his own diorama, wrapped in a cocoon of concentration, that he hadn't paid much attention to Ned's or Sal's. When he finally checked them out, a sinking feeling took hold of him. Papa had helped Ned make an ocean from different shades of blue tissue paper, which he'd crinkled and layered. And because Ned had used real seashells and the store-bought sharks, his diorama looked professional. He'd also made 2 streaks of blood trailing from the sharks' mouths with glitter glue, a perfect gruesome finishing touch. In comparison, Billy felt that his project looked like it was made by a 2-year-old.
I did agonize over dioramas and things like that because I always wanted them to be perfect. And I think because I was an artist, I loved doing those things, but I always had a vision in my head that I'm sure was beyond what my capabilities were.
While Kevin's books often explore the quieter, everyday worries of childhood, he also notices the kind of worry that comes from outside of ourselves, from other people, like bullies, as he noticed one afternoon when he looked out of his studio window.
You could see the kids walking to and from school. And there was one day when their school had gotten out and there was a little girl and she was being followed by 3 other kids. And I could tell that it was not a happy situation, that they were teasing her for some reason. And it struck something in me, and I ran downstairs and said, "Are you okay? And is everything all right?" And they all said, "Yes, fine. And end of story. She went on and they left her alone. But it really stuck with me. And I thought, I'm going to write a book about a kid, and my idea was that I would have a kid who hear her light school until something happened and then didn't. And I was trying to think of what it could be.
The book would eventually become Chrysanthemum.
And I thought I could have a kid who really liked his or her name and then goes to school and gets teased. And that would be the gist of the story. And I don't know why, but I thought it would be very clever for one of those kids to say, your name has 13 letters, exactly half as many letters as in the entire alphabet. And I thought, well, 13, some people think is unlucky.
In the book, Chrysanthemum wilts over and over again as she gets teased by the other girls at school. It's her music teacher, Mrs. Twinkle, who intervenes. She thinks Chrysanthemum's name is wonderful. So wonderful, she's even thinking of naming her baby Chrysanthemum, if it's a girl. In the year of Billy Miller, Billy's teacher, Miss Silver, also plays an important role. There's a whole section dedicated to Billy's interactions with her. Miss Silver even reassures Billy when he tells her how worried he is about second grade. I asked Kevin why teachers figure so prominently in his work.
I always loved so many of the teachers that I had throughout my life. And when you really think about it, a teacher is such a huge part of a kid's life. I mean, as they're living it, they're in school 5 days a week, and here's this person that they spend so much time with. So I think it's a really important relationship. And I had some extraordinary teachers throughout my life. And I really wanted to celebrate that. And I felt like I had done that with Lily's Purple Plastic Purse and a little bit with Chrysanthemum too, with Mrs. Twinkle. But in the year of Billy Miller, I really wanted a teacher to be a really big part of that book. And that's when it was because of thinking about the impact of the teacher that I decided to divide that book into 4 sections. So it's his mother, his father, his sister, and his teacher. And they were the 4 important people in his life. And the teacher was right up there with the family members.
Teachers' impacts can be huge, and Kevin knows that from firsthand experience.
For myself, it was a high school English teacher when I was a junior who said to me, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a book with your name on it one day. And that, I think, was the moment, even though I was going in that direction, where I thought, here's this person I admire who's an adult, and she said this, so maybe I can.
According to Lynne Rae, that experience of teachers isn't terribly uncommon. She told me about a talk she'd be giving soon at a Michigan Art Educators Association conference on the same subject.
So I thought it would be interesting to ask different people that I knew if they had a good experience with their high school or elementary school art teacher and what that was. She took me seriously, or he saw me and I felt accepted and safe. So I feel like those are super important things that teachers do for us. But take me seriously. I remember when I was in elementary school, my mom was actually an elementary school teacher, and one of the other elementary school teachers had us over for lunch. And this teacher's mother was there. And I was in a little room with her while my mother talked with her daughter. And she gave me, it was a kid's version of Shakespeare. It made me feel so good that she thought I was someone who would like this or could read this. So she took me seriously.
And at home in a faraway place, Lissy's teachers are all around her. She learns new words from her father's friend Raoul, from his girlfriend Anna, and her kids. She even learns from people she meets in passing, which Lissy's grandma tells her are some of the most important relationships you can have. Lissy's grandmother says, "The world is held together by tiny friendships, and bigger ones too." I asked Lynne Rae what that means to her.
This is one of my major theories of life. So in my town, we don't get home mail delivery. We have to have a post office box. So I have to go to the post office every day and open my box. And I always see neighbors, people, and have little conversations. And there's a poster up on the bulletin board of the post office that says, "Save time, you can do this online," blah, 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 blah. But to me, all of those little interactions, like I also go to the bank in person. I go to the grocery store every other day. And to me, those are all like little, nobody can see me making these hand gestures where my fingers are weaving together. To me, that's the social fabric of our world. And all those little things, like they might be unimportant, but I think on a bigger level, they're super important and they make us feel part of the world. And I can be in a crabby, sad mood and I can go to the post office and somebody can say something to me and it just can turn me around. So that's what I mean when I say tiny friendships. I think you can have a little interaction with somebody that takes like 30 seconds, but it can be part of the thing that keeps you on board.
That social fabric Lynne Rae mentioned is stitched together with small moments of care. It's the people who do us small kindnesses, after all, who we tend to remember, whether they happen to be good friends, teachers, people who stand up for us, even strangers. When we were talking about this kind of kindness, Lynne Rae mentioned a speech by author George Saunders.
It's a high school graduation speech, I think, from when one of his kids graduated. And he talks about how he went to his high school reunion. And he talked to a number of people there who had come specifically to thank someone for being kind to them. And so I think that's the big thing. You're not doing it so somebody will remember you, but it's something we do remember when someone does that for us.
In the year of Billy Miller, compassion shows up over and over in small, ordinary moments. In one, Billy is trying very hard not to hurt anyone's feelings. Close to the end of the book, he has to write a poem about a family member for a school performance. But should he choose his mom? And if he chooses mom, will he hurt his dad's feelings? When he has a hard time deciding who to write about, his father extends a hand.
It was an agonizing decision for him. And he expresses his sort of trepidation with his father, who really makes it very clear, and I think opens the door for him to choose whichever he wants, and it will be just fine.
This moment was inspired by something that happened to Kevin when he was younger.
I was injured once at a park, and an ambulance came, and I was 5 or 6, and I had to choose who was going to go in the ambulance with me, my mother or father, because my other siblings were at the park. And I remember, even though I was hurt, I remember thinking, well, if I choose my mom, my dad will be upset, and if I choose my dad, my mom will be upset. So I know that I went back to that spot when I was having Billy make that decision, but I thought Papa handled it in a good way, and I thought Billy, he handled it in a good way too.
Papa tells Billy it's going to be okay no matter who he picks. And when Billy chooses Mama, he uses a little game to make sure no one's feelings get hurt. He would tell Mama and Papa he was thinking of a number, then have them each pick a number from 1 to 10. Whatever number Mama chose, he would say, "That's the one." When the time comes for Billy to read his poem to an audience, he's excited and nervous. He recites his poem, the crowd cheers, and the show ends. But the most memorable moment of the book comes when the microphone is turned off.
He touched the silver-netted top of the microphone and he could tell that the power was off. He swallowed. Before he could change his mind, he began to recite his poem from memory. He felt the first few words catch in his mouth, and then they rolled out of him as easy as could be. He did it quickly, but he did it. When he was finished, he could hear the rush of blood in his ears. He felt light, as if he weighed next to nothing. He scanned the crowd for Mama, and he saw her instantly. She was right at the foot of the stage. Their eyes connected, and he knew that she'd been watching him. She'd heard him, even without the microphone on. She was smiling and nodding. Explosions like little volcanoes were going off inside him. He felt wonderful. Maybe he'd never felt better. And then, because he felt so good, and because he could not stop himself, he leaned into the silent microphone and exclaimed in a voice meant just for Mama, "This is the year of Billy Miller."
Kevin says he still thinks of Billy as one of his own kids. Books like Kevin's and Lynne Rae's become part of our families too when we read them, with their incredible closeness and their quiet but gigantic kinds of feeling. Sometimes Kevin hears as much from his readers, even in unexpected places.
I was once with my first editor, Susan Hirschman, and we were on Monhegan Island off the coast of Maine, and it was off-season, so there weren't many people, and it was a weekend. And we were at an art gallery on the island, and we were looking at things, and around the corner, there was a mother and a couple kids, and we heard a mother say, "Why are you acting so Wemberley-ish?" And our ears just like, perked up.
In one of Kevin's mouse books, Wemberley Worried, Wemberley worries about absolutely everything.
And Susan approached the woman and said, "What did you just say?" And the woman said, "Oh, nothing, you wouldn't understand." And she said, "No, really, what did you say?" And she said, "Oh, I just said, why are you acting so Wemberley-ish? It's from this children's book, you wouldn't know." And she said, "Well, I would. Here's the author." And then we had this beautiful moment, but just knowing that, like, that had become their family, part of their vernacular. It was part of their family's lore that I love. I mean, that's really a nice thing to know and understand and really feel that what one does has an impact in the larger world.
Billy Miller is older now, Kevin says. He worries a bit less these days, and he's a fine young man. As for Lissy, I suspect she's fluent in Spanish by now. In books like these, and like Chrysanthemum and Wemberley Worried, we get to learn the big feelings that hide in quiet moments. Growing up is necessarily made up of lots of small wonders and worries. And for Kevin and Lynne Rae, their books are a place to honor the ordinary, which is filled, most of all, with each other. I'm Lisa DeSaro. Thanks for listening. Special thanks to my colleagues at HarperCollins, Elba Luz and Virginia Duncan, and to Podfly for their production support.